Let me again welcome you this evening and introduce myself. I'm Cary Coglianese, and I am the Edward Shills Professor of Law at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm also a professor in our political science department, and I am privileged to direct the Penn program on regulation, which I'll talk a little bit about. I thought at the outset I would just let you know that I'm an academic, but as much as I have the world of academia and scholarship as part of what I do, I see myself also engaged in two other very important pursuits. One is teaching, and the other is outreach to the world at large, and trying to bridge what we know in the world of scholarship and research with the world of practice to make regulation better. So what I'd like to do today is set up the next 3 days by offering an overview of why we're here. As I said, I direct the Penn program on regulation, and this program brings together about 30 faculty affiliates from across the University of Pennsylvania. And the University of Pennsylvania is a private institution. It's an Ivy League institution based in Philadelphia. And our faculty that are affiliated with this program work across all different fields of regulation, from telecommunications to environmental regulation, and everything in the mix. We also have a particular emphasis on what I call cross-cutting issues, issues that are common to regulators in any field of endeavor and anywhere in the world. Regulators around the world are managing their institutions and their workforce, building human capital. Regulators around the world are engaging with members of their publics, and regulators around the world are enforcing regulations. So we have had a number of projects ranging from work on collaborative rulemaking to open government and transparency issues, to some very interesting work about using algorithms and machine learning to increase the effectiveness of regulatory enforcement targeting. And these and other issues, whether it's use of risk analysis and benefit cost analysis, are some of these cross-cutting issues that we have tended to focus on, and we've produced a number of books over the last several years on some of these cross-cutting issues, whether it's new challenges that regulators in the developed world face about the safety of consumer products from imports from abroad, to issues about systematic breakdown of regulatory systems, to even questions about the relationship between regulation and employment. And certainly with the global recession, and one that we've certainly felt a great deal in the U.S., that's been an issue that we've taken a look at and produced some books on recently. We're here today to talk about excellence in regulators. So I thought I'd start by just asking us to think about what is it that makes a regulator a regulator. When we're talking about what it means to be a best-in-class regulator or an excellent regulator, what is it that we mean? Now, around the world, there are a whole host of institutions that are regulators. What is it that they do, and what do they have in common? Well, I wanted to just start by talking about some of those things to set a context for the next 3 days, and then we'll get into a little bit about what we're doing and where today's session and the next couple of days' discussion fits into the larger project that we're engaged in. So a regulator, I think, can be thought of as a public institution that implements and enforces laws and policies, and is in that sense charged with solving problems that are consistent with its mission and mandate that it's been given. And it does so by steering and shaping the behavior of others, individuals, but also other organizations as well. So the work of a regulator is one that's interactive from its very nature, interactive with those who are subject to the rules that it enforces and implements, but also interacting with all of the public that is affected by those. So what does a regulator do? I think it's important to see that regulators, again, around the world will do a number of things that are in common. They all have to set priorities. There's a lot of problems out there to be solved, and regulators often have limited resources, and they have to make choices, just like much of what we all have to do in our own lives. We have to set priorities and then make decisions. And sometimes those decisions involve setting new rules or directives or guidelines, but other times those decisions involve ones about the other actions that regulators take. Regulators, in addition to making decisions, they also communicate. They communicate about those decisions, and they engage with others in the making of those decisions. I don't know of any regulator around the world that is all the time just holed up in its office. There is some kind of communication process. If nothing else, those who are subjected to the rules that a regulator is implementing need to know about them. That's an essential part of communication as well. But they also do this not just for the sake of enforcing laws, but to actually solve problems. And they solve problems by interpreting and applying those rules, but also by seeking compliance and using incentives, and whether that's just education and outreach, or whether it's through other means, including enforcement actions. And finally, at the end of all that the regulator does, starting from setting a priority and making decisions and solving problems and shaping incentives, regulators also are evaluating all of those things, and to varying degrees, but trying to learn how to do better. That's something that a regulator also does. So a regulator, so far we've defined in terms of what it does. I also want to introduce 4 common features. I think most regulators, again, around the world, share these 4 common features, and there may be more as well. But just to set the stage here, I think it's important to remember these 4 common features. First of all, regulators are given a mission. They're public institutions. They've often been created by a government to do a certain thing, okay? And they've got a mission. And that mission generally encompasses a public interest mission, but also a specific mandate that the regulator's been given. The second common feature is that because they are working on interpreting and applying rules, often in very particularized situations, maybe inspecting facilities that are in remote locations, but also because they're operating on often very complex technical issues, maybe even a little bit out of the main public eye. Regulators, for whatever reason, do have some discretion in how they go about this priority setting and decision making and everything else. But at the same time, they also have accountability. And because they're separate institutions, they have that degree of discretion, but they have accountability. Accountability to whom? Other governmental entities and authorities, those legislatures and parliaments and that set up regulators. Also accountability and interaction with the entities that they regulate, with the various rights holders and community interests that are affected by what they do. The overall public has a way of keeping some accountability as well. I think all regulators have this to varying degrees. A third feature is that the work that regulators do in steering and shaping the behavior of others leads them into contact with a wide variety of regulated entities. A variety in a number of different ways. Some may be individual actors. Some may be very large, complex organizations. Another thing about regulated entities is that they are often themselves producers of social value. There are, whether it's producing goods or services that other people value, employment opportunities that people value, there are other things that are going on. A regulator often is not eliminating entirely an activity, but regulating it, meaning moderate it, keep it within some bounds. Why? Because within some of those bounds, there are things that people value. Airplane travel is something we all enjoy, but it is regulated to ensure that there is a modicum of safety. And it is also the case, say, with airplane travel, that there are varying degrees of capacity on the part of regulated entities to achieve the goals that the regulator has set out to pursue. Sometimes that capacity comes with a real alignment of interests. Airlines want to make sure that they run their air transport systems in a safe way so that they have customers. There's an alignment in many settings between the private interest and the broader public interest. But there's also varying degrees of capacity to just simply do what society is expecting be done. Some firms have that capacity in a regulated environment when other firms maybe do not. So that is part of the complexity, actually, which is the fourth feature of a regulator. Oftentimes, regulators actually are handed the more challenging work. The legislatures may well adopt mandates that are broad and general, maybe even platitudinous, things that everybody can agree with, and then it's left up to the regulator to figure out how to actually get the rubber to meet the road, so to speak. And in that process, regulators are confronting often complex technologies and technological issues. They're also interacting with complex social systems as well, from those large organizations to the way that the large organizations may be embedded with local communities and with larger regional economies. And ultimately, regulators are often bumping up against trade-offs as well in society. Maybe in some cases, trade-offs between one kind of risk and another kind of risk. Which do we prefer? So what we hope to do today, and certainly in the next couple of days, is talk about how entities that face these kind of common features, and I would submit that the AER shares many of these common features as well, how they go about thinking about what it means to perform in an excellent manner. What does it mean to achieve excellence, to achieve a best-in-class status? Confronting these kinds of basic challenges. Now, when we started off this project, we organized our work around a model of regulatory performance that has 4 key elements. And because we're from the University of Pennsylvania and I direct the Penn program on regulation, it just so happens that these 4 key factors we've labeled all with 4 Ps. But it starts at the top with priority setting, making those initial choices about where to focus one's attention. And that moves along down this vertical axis here toward actual problem solving. The actual issuing of rules or statements or making adjudicatory decisions or enforcement actions, going out and actually doing the work of a regulator. But also along this horizontal dimension, there's two other important P's. One is people. People within the organization, within the regulatory organization, how they're managed, how they're trained, how they're led. And then the other P is the public, which refers to the external world, external from the regulator's perspective. And that's all of you here. Ultimately, these combine to lead to the outcomes in the world. Outcomes in terms of safety, risk reduction, outcomes in terms of administrative processing and other cost and burden either being high or low. The outcomes may be good or bad, but they're going to, we are thinking, operate on a basis of how all those four things are working together. Okay, so we proposed back in, I think it was August or so of last year, a proposal based upon those key factors that affect regulatory performance. We proposed this to the AER in response to a call for proposals, a competitive process that the AER issued. And there were a number of other entities, organizations, probably universities, that were also putting in proposals. And ours was accepted last fall, and we've begun our process of working on this project in earnest around early November. And what I'd like to do is just say a few words about what we are doing as part of the Best-in-Class Regulator Initiative, and then suggest how this gathering that we have here today fits into our overall project. So the Best-in-Class Regulator Initiative, I should say a word about what it is and a word about what it isn't. What is it? We are charged in responding to the call for proposals and according to the proposal that we put forward to develop a framework of excellence, to come up with and identify attributes of best-in-class or excellent regulatory performance in the overall sense, and then to develop recommendations about how a regulator like the AER can go about striving to achieve or improve on those dimensions of excellence. And also, importantly, how it can go about determining how well it's doing in that quest and pursuit of excellence. Now, what that means, in a sense, is that we're creating a structure and a set of recommendations about how to use the structure to go about pursuing excellence. It is, from the very start, designed to be a general structure that could be useful for the AER, but also useful for other energy extraction regulators around the world, or other regulators in other realms. Because it's designed to both reflect overall best practices in the global sense, but also reflect the concerns and values that are shared by many across the province here in Alberta. What it isn't, what this project isn't, is it's not a report evaluating the AER. We're not grading the AER. We're not digging in and finding out what it's doing well or what it's not doing well. We're not going to pass judgment on the AER. But what we develop can be used both by the AER or by others as a way of structuring an inquiry into some kind of evaluation of where the AER is. In that sense, what I like to say is that we're creating the syllabus or rubrics for those educators out there, rubrics for grading, but we're not actually doing. Any regulator, the AER, will need to pick up what we develop, pick up the syllabus, if you will, and do the reading. And they'll need to fill in gaps, and they'll need to make it apply to their circumstances and be able then to put it in place. But I wanted to make clear that it's still something that we want to make sure fits well with and accommodates and reflects the views of all of you here in the room and the broader public in Alberta as best we can. Now, we have three main parts to this overall project. And I wanted to just say a few words about each of these to give you a sense of what we've been doing, where we're headed, with a report that should be released ultimately with recommendations this summer. The first part of what we're doing is engaging in research. Now remember those 4 Ps that I talked about: priority setting, problem solving, people, and the public. We have actually commissioned a series of in-depth research papers organized around those 4 core papers that are synthesizing the available research literature to find out what we can say about the best practices in all those 4 areas. We also have produced, and probably within the next couple of weeks even, we'll have issued out on our website an analysis of regulators' strategic plans. 9 different countries around the world, 21 or 20 reports. We've studied the strategic plans of regulators themselves and tried to extract from those the attributes that those regulators have set for themselves, those aspirations that they've set for themselves in terms of pursuing excellence. And finally, we're going to be producing an edited volume that will be out actually a little bit after the project is done in early 2016. We expect it will be published by the Brookings Institution Press that develops the views of about a dozen or so international experts on regulation, again, from around the world, and their views about what makes a regulator excellent. Some of their early thoughts about that question are already up on our website, thebestinclassregulator.org. And you can, if you haven't seen them yet, peruse those at your leisure. Those papers will be expanded later into a book. So that's one thing that we're doing. The other thing that we are doing is engaging in what is called expert elicitation. That is trying to identify from experts and extract from them the advice that we can about what defines regulatory excellence and how to measure it. And toward this end, last month, we convened a workshop, a dialogue with experts from Europe, the Middle East, North America, Australia, both academics, as well as we had a number of perspectives from environmental groups and from some industry experts as well. We had a robust dialogue at the University of Pennsylvania Law School in which we focused on defining and measuring regulatory excellence. And as I said before, the draft discussion papers the experts prepared are online. We've held a number of other seminars and meetings, and upcoming, at the end of all of what we're doing, we'll subject our report to a peer review process as well. Finally, though, and not at all the least, we've been spending a lot of time and interest in hearing the views of those who are interacting with the AER. I spent several weeks here earlier this year and late last year in one-on-one meetings with various folks who have different perspectives on the work of the AER. In addition, we, as Jim had mentioned, convened just a couple of weeks ago a dialogue session in Edmonton with a variety of Aboriginal community members. And finally, of course, this occasion here. This is a very important part of our overall strategy here. And what we are hoping to get out of this, our goals for the next 3 days are first and foremost to listen and to learn. And so the members of our Penn team will be listening, and then we'll be taking notes. We're going to be processing all that we hear here today and tomorrow and the next day. And we really appreciate you taking your time to help in this way. We want to listen and learn about your thoughts about what are the attributes of excellence and about also what you would like to see to be convinced that a regulator, that the AER is actually demonstrating progress toward or achievement of excellence. And these are your thoughts, your ideas here will indeed inform our recommendations.